Welcome to Dive Deeper.
Hey everybody.
So, a couple announcements. For those of you doing Title Impact, remember we have a soup lunch fundraiser, not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, the first weekend of April. So if you help with that by making soup with your parents or helping set up and serve that Sunday or cleaning up, people will give donations, and those donations will be split between everyone who helps with the lunch to go toward your Title Impact registration.
Okay, there's also a bunch of cool outreach opportunities in the next little bit. First one is an evangelism training on Saturday, April 1st at Middleton Baptist. So this would be for you if you're interested in learning some practical tools to share your faith. Pastor Libby is leading the training with some of her team who went to Africa last fall.
Yeah, so that's on April 1st. The following Saturday, April 8th, just before Easter, we're putting on an event for kids at Rotary Park called the Easter Extravaganza, and Sydney is coordinating this outreach event. So if you'd like to help, talk to your leader and they can connect you with her. She still needs a bunch of volunteers to help run the different stations and help pack the Easter eggs. So this is going to be a huge way for us to share Jesus with our community. Like last year, 200 or 300 people came to this event. So it's a super cool opportunity to be a part of.
Last thing, our church together with Emmanuel Congregational are running an Alpha course starting after Easter on Thursday nights. And any of you would be totally welcome to be a part of it. Alpha is a video series designed for people who aren't Christians to come explore questions about faith without being judged or anything like that.
Yeah, so like we did Youth Alpha a couple years ago, but a bunch of you weren't a part of that. And here's the thing, like you guys are old enough to be part of this grown-up Alpha, right? Like I think it would be so cool to have a mixture of ages of people there. So if you know a friend who's open to exploring faith, who you think would feel comfortable coming into a more open environment like Alpha, where they can ask their tough questions and not be judged and anything like that, like you could invite them to this and go with them. So if you're interested in that and want more information, you can talk to your leader and I can get in touch with you.
Okay, so there's a bunch of outreach opportunities coming up. Libby's evangelism training, the extravaganza, and Alpha. Let's pause now for our warm-up question. How do you feel about sharing your faith with someone? What barriers do you feel toward sharing your faith? All right, well, what should we look at in Acts 16?
All right, well, Paul and his team are on another missionary journey, and they come to a city named Philippi. And cool note here, this is actually the same city that the New Testament letter Philippians is sent to. Anyway, Luke tells us the story of a couple of the first people who come to faith in Philippi.
Right, so first Paul and friends go outside the city by a river and find some people who worship the God of Israel. But they aren't Jewish. One of them is named Lydia, and she believes in Jesus. And so does her family, and they are all baptized.
All right, great summary. So pause now and read Acts 16, 13 to 15.
So, Lydia comes to faith in Jesus, and the gospel spread to her whole household. Then there's another story of a whole household coming to faith, right?
Yeah, so Paul and Silas are put in prison, but God miraculously sets them free, and at first, the jailer is going to kill himself because he thinks that he'll be punished for all the prisoners escaping. But Paul and Silas say, don't kill yourself, like we're still right here. And they lead the prison guard to faith in Jesus.
And again, he and his whole household are baptized.
All right, so pause again and read Acts 16, 27 to 34.
Okay, so here are the two stories in the city of Philippi of whole households coming to faith in Jesus. What does that teach us about God and about people?
Yeah, well, I think it shows us a really common way that people come to faith in Jesus. So often, the gospel moves through networks of relationships.
What do you mean by networks of relationships?
Yeah, well, in the first century culture, someone's household wasn't just mom and dad and 2.5 kids, like we often think of in Canada today. The household usually included grandma and maybe some aunts or cousins, and it included slaves or servants and sometimes business partners that people worked with. So when it says their whole household, This could have been a decent sized group of people. And it was a group of people that all had relationships with that original person who came to faith.
Okay, so like Lydia came to faith, and then her network of relationships, her household learned about Jesus through her and came to faith. And the same thing with the Philippian jailer.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this teaches us a really important lesson about how to think strategically about doing outreach and sharing our faith. The best people for you to share your faith with are people who you already have a relationship with. So who do you know who you could tell about Jesus?
Nice. And then also, when someone comes to faith, like say someone random starts coming to your youth group who you didn't have a relationship with, but they just show up and they come to faith in Jesus, I think these stories show us that the very best thing would be for them to get all their friends together and share Jesus with them, because their friends have a relationship of trust already built with that person.
Yeah, totally. So maybe you've made a connection with someone who recently came to faith. So how could you help guide them to bring the gospel to their network of relationships? That might mean, they go and tell their friends about Jesus, or it could mean that they, invite you to meet their friends and you do the talking about Jesus, or even it could mean that you encourage them to bring their friends to youth group like rally night or church or something like that. The gospel moves most naturally through those networks of relationships because there's already that trust built there. And also, those people will see the transformation in the life of the person who recently came to Jesus.
All right. Well, let's do some brainstorming about how we can be strategic about sharing our faith. Who is in your network of relationships who you could share Jesus with? Or is there a person you know who recently came to faith who you could help share their network of relationships?
All right, so there's something else I wanted to point out about these two stories of whole households coming to faith.
Okay, what's that?
So sometimes I've read these statements like when Paul tells the Philippian jailer, believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved along with everyone in your household. Mm-hmm. And I've wondered, wait, does that mean that his whole family was automatically saved? You know what I mean? If you're part of a Christian family, does that automatically make you a Christian?
Okay, well, that's interesting. I can see how you might read the sentence like that, but that's not really what it's getting at.
Yeah, you're not automatically a Christian just because you grew up in a family where your parents are Christians. You're not automatically saved by the faith of your parents. You have to have your own faith. You have to accept Jesus as Lord of your life and ask for forgiveness of your sins.
Okay, so I believe that's true too. But if you're saying Paul doesn't mean his household is automatically saved, show me in the text then where it says that.
All right, yeah, thank you for that question. We have to make sure that our beliefs are actually based on the Bible, right? Don't just take my word for it if what I say doesn't fit with what you read in the Bible. Okay, so take a look at Acts 16, 31 to 34, and especially verse 34. Okay, so did you catch that in verse 34? It doesn't say that the whole household was automatically saved because the Philippian jailer's faith, even though they themselves didn't believe, right? That's not what it says. It says they all had believed in God.
Okay, cool. That makes more sense. So Paul is saying that each of them should believe in God and be baptized. And if they do, each of them will be saved.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this is important to talk about because a bunch of you come from families where your parents are Christians. I know that's not all of you, but for those who grew up with Christian parents or who grew up going to church, this is so important. Your parents' faith does not automatically save you. You aren't automatically a Christian. You need to put your faith in Jesus yourself. You need to submit your own life to Jesus as Lord and ask him to forgive your own sins. And that's my story. I grew up going to church and I was a really good kid, but when I was 10 or 11, I went to this drama presentation at another church in town. And it was like a Christian play. And there are all these different scenarios of people dying and then either going to heaven or going to hell. And like, it was kind of intense. So like there's a scene with a teenage girl at a party and her friends pressure her to take pills and she dies and goes to hell because she doesn't believe in Jesus. And it was intense. And then there's like little Susie in the car with her parents and she believes in God, but her parents don't. And they get in a car crash and they all die and her parents go to hell, but little Susie goes to heaven. Anyway, like it was intense. Like I would not necessarily do that myself as an evangelistic strategy. But at the end, a pastor got up and gave an invitation to put your faith in Jesus. And it was really effective for me to understand that it wasn't good enough just for me to be a good kid. It wasn't good enough just to go to church. It wasn't good enough just that my parents were Christians. I had to personally ask Jesus for forgiveness and submit to him as Lord of my life. And that night I did. And it was the first time where my faith was really real for me.
Thanks for sharing that bit of your story, Oliver. So I think it would be great tonight to just take a moment to talk about that. And if there's anybody who's in your group who says, yeah, I've never actually done that for myself. I believe in God and I grew up going to church, but I've never asked Jesus to forgive me and I've never surrendered to him as Lord of my life. If that's you tonight, you can make your faith your own tonight. You can invite Jesus to be the Lord of your life tonight, and I'm sure your group and your leader would love to walk you through that and pray with you.